everyone and welcome back to Planet Zoo and Project COVEA. It is episode 2 of season 2 and today, as you can tell from the thumbnail and title, we are working on the Gharial habitat. Now I know the Gharial is also the first animal that we included in the first season of COVEA, but they're one of my favourite animals and honestly they really fit in this habitat. As you can see in the background, I'm doing a ton of training, but there's not too much to talk about in regards to that. I was initially going to do a saltwater crocodile habitat here, but at the time I built this, it was recently after the aquatic pack. And in the update that accompanied the aquatic pack's release, saltwater crocodiles were able to dive, to actually swim under the water instead of just going on top. Now this wasn't the case for gharials, but as of the time I'm doing this voiceover, which is about a month and a half later because this series has been immensely weird so far, the gharials are now getting the ability to dive in the 1.5 update, which is accompanying the East Asia Animal Pack, which is the biggest pack they've had. They are including 8 animals. I'm not going to talk about that too much today, but the trailer for that was actually released earlier today for me, so that's really cool. Unfortunately, with this habitat, we won't be able to see the Gharial dive, although now that I'm thinking about it, there might be a way I can figure it out. But at the very least, we can't see that just yet. So I decided against the saltwater crocodile because I wanted to make an exhibit in which you could see it dive, and the Gharial is pretty much the only other crocodilian that I could think of, apart from the COVEA S2E2 caiman, which is a bit too small for this size habitat. Anyways, you'll now be able to see me building up the fence at the front of the habitat, which is going to be your main viewing point for the Gharials. Actually, there's a lot of really good viewing points for these animals, but this is the first one that you will see. You walk straight through the entrance and look right over this fence. You will see a bunch of Gharials swimming throughout their little lake. And in this fence design, you can really start to see me kind of developing the COVEA style, what this zoo is going to be like, at least the first bit of it. But what I plan on doing is having this as kind of the older part of the zoo that's been here for years. Lots of stone, lots of wood, the style of the entrance, this exhibit, and to be honest, for the next good few episodes, a lot of the zoo is going to be like this, but for certain sections, I kind of plan on having them as more built up, more modern. I think I might have talked about this in the last episode, for example, me having these snow leopards, that a facility to hold a snow leopard, since we're in a tropical climate, would have to be completely enclosed and completely cooled. It would be a lot more expensive, and therefore the style would have to be a lot more modern, so I plan on doing that at some point in the future. That also might go for stuff like penguins, etc. But for the time being, I am really developing the COVEA style here, and you can see that of course in the fence design, which took quite a while to make, to be honest. I'm not 100% happy with it, but that's kind of the idea, that I don't want it to be perfect. But this fence has a really nice curve to it. It's made out of stone, wood, and a little bit of metal to hang over the Gharials so they can't reach up and grab people who are reaching their arms in, or at least hopefully not, because people are idiots. Also, you would have seen a few minutes ago in the time-lapse, I built up a kind of back wall. It's not completely stone or not a complete fence, and up on there we're going to have some kind of pirate themed buildings, which we're going to be building in a future episode. Not today, I did not have time to do that, but yeah, you'll be able to go up onto a little raised platform where we'll have maybe some food, some drinks, stuff like that, and that'll tie in the zoo a little bit better. And it's also another area to view the Gharials from. You can kind of view them from above rather from the side. I am really feeling it speaking today. But anyways, as is tradition with the part of the time-lapse that there really isn't much to comment on, I'm going to do a shameless self-promotion. If you are enjoying the video, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, give me your feedback. Any changes I can make that you guys suggest, I will at the very least consider it, and all I really want to do is improve the content, so hopefully you guys are enjoying. If you are, you know what to do. Let's move on. Also, I don't believe I've mentioned this yet this season, but if you guys want an animal named after you, you can simply leave a comment down below. I will put it in a notes file that I have on my computer, and whenever I do introduce one of those animals to the zoo, I will name one of them after you. I did still have a list of names from the stuff last season, but I figured just wiping it out, a clean slate, because we're on a brand new channel. So if you're one of those people who already had an animal that you wanted to be named after you, leave a comment on this video or any of the future videos and I will do just that. So even if you've said before, you should probably say again, just so I remember. I'm also trying to remember to actually focus on the education boards and stuff like that, conservation boards, education boards for the animals, for the environment, and making it kind of more like a normal zoo, because when those things aren't there, it looks a little bit barren and it kind of ties everything together. It's not something I normally use, but it's something that I'm going to try use a little bit more. Also, I don't want to get you guys too excited for it, but next episode is a big build. Yeah, it took a long time. We literally doubled the size of the zoo. Next episode, we made it about the size of the Gharial and entrance together, so it's pretty goddamn big. You'll be able to see in a second that I'm going to try to make a path kind of slowly climbing up on the left side of the Gharial habitat. There's a little trick you can do with the tour rides, because the slope that the car actually drives on is obviously a slope, and it's a perfect one. You can't have crazy juts with it. So in some instances, it's useful to put a tour thing down, then put the track in the direction that you want the path to go at the slope you want it to be on, and then you've got to just move the terrain slightly over that path and you can guarantee it's a smooth slope. Now this is usually useful, but not in this instance, mainly because I already had paths down and you can't put tour things on the paths. So I tried to use that trick here, trying to improve my quality of things in Planet Zoo, but it didn't really work, so I just ended up using normal terrain tools. But as I keep saying, this is kind of the older and more rustic part of the zoo, so having a path completely flat isn't really what I'm going for. Having kind of little bumps, little inconsistencies in the path I don't think is a bad thing, but all in all the path is pretty smooth and it looks good. Anyway, moving on from making that left path, I wanted to make something a little bit more interesting to give a reason for this pond that the Gharials have, or I guess lake is more apt description. So of course the logical reason for a lake to be there would be a river, but the entire habitat was completely surrounded by paths, so this raised path came in very, very useful, because I carved out some terrain from underneath it and put a river going through that, which I think looks awesome. Not only does it provide another vantage point to look into the Gharial habitat, but on the opposite side of the path, it provides a really good vantage point to look into the habitat that we're building in the next episode. I've already built that as of recording this voiceover, and it looks awesome. I'm really happy with it. Like I said, it's a big build. So I think the idea of having the river going underneath the path was a really, really good one. And I'm going to try and make sure that river actually goes all the way through the zoo in actually interesting ways and doesn't just end off for no reason. So I think that'll make the zoo pretty interesting to have a river winding all the way through at least some parts of it, and we'll probably have more than one river, but for this first one at very least it's going to be winding through this exhibit, the next exhibit, the exhibit after that, and then probably the next few. Also, I am indeed actually decorating under the water with logs, kind of mossy rocks, and with the aquatic pack came a bunch of aquatic stuff like eelgrass, hyacinth plants. I can't quite remember most of the names of them, but they make the underwater look way, way cooler than it did before. But that actually isn't on the time-lapse, at least of this build, because the underwater camera effects don't look that good, at least not sped up like this. But you will get to see what that looks like in the cinematics at the end. You'll get a glimpse under the water and it looks really cool. Not super detailed, but it's better than nothing. And that's going to come in way more useful if we do actually introduce a way to watch the Gharials as they swim under the water as of the 1.5 update. Because of course, looking at underwater where it's just completely barren, just a bunch of dirt, is pretty ugly. So having some bubble special effects, some logs, some plants, stuff like that makes it look a lot better. If you can't tell, I'm very excited to see the Gharial dive. I know it's not that much different to the saltwater crocodile, but Gharials are my favorite animals, and I just think it's going to be really cool to see. And by my favorite animal, I mean one of my favorite animals, because I can never pick a favorite animal. Anyways, I just ranted right through one of the more interesting parts of building this habitat, which is these kind of circular planters that I built on either side. They're not super interesting, but I used mud and these kind of African style rings and then put the mulch in them, and then later I'll put some plants in them, and just overall they look pretty cool. A bit of a feature to this habitat. Also, all the paths that I'm putting down I've set to not have a border, so I'm actually making my own border, which could end up being a really annoying thing to do, but at the moment it's been fine. And the way I'm doing it is literally just rotating the East Asia stone blocks, lowering them down mostly into the ground to create a kind of stone barrier, or border, not barrier. But also, as I said, I'm implementing some conservation boards and stuff like that, some education signs that will be put inside the custom barrier of the Gharial habitat, and as I've repeated over and over, I feel like I'm really focusing on the lighting, so we've actually got a bit of light around there. Planet Zoo's lighting is, by the way, amazing, but the light sources don't actually go that far. They kind of go sadly short. Like, I have these big street lights spread around, but they don't really seem to light up the roads. They just light up the tiny bit of ground below them, which is fine. It's not a big deal because when you're looking at it in the day, it looks like it should light everything up, but when it goes to nighttime, it doesn't really that well. But as I'm sure you can see from the background, we are now putting in some faux rocks and plants, just kind of filling out the habitat, putting in those final details that in the end make it look a hell of a lot better. I always hate my builds until I put plants in. They just look really ugly, really blocky, but then you get the plants in and it brings it all together. Plants, long story short, are the best. And rocks, can't forget about rocks, especially the fur rocks from the aquatic pack, because they're colorable. You can change the color of the fur rocks. It's the best. Colorable rocks. are the best. They are godly. By the way, I know it's extremely late at this point because the aquatic pack came out months ago. In fact, we're getting our next DLC in probably a couple weeks after this video goes up. It releases on the 30th of March if you don't know. But the plants that came with the aquatic pack and the free update that came alongside the aquatic pack are amazing. The red lipstick palms, I think that's what they're called. The giant rhubarb plants, they're incredible. The water hyacinths, the weeping willows, they're my favorite. They're honestly the best plants in the game. I haven't had an opportunity to rant about it, but now I do because I'm actually using them, and I'm so happy that I've had a time to finally get this love and appreciation for plants out of my system. Now you might think I'm weird for saying that, but me and the plants, we think you're the weird one because you should love and appreciate these gorgeous plants. I also want to talk specifically about how I made the kind of waterside plants in this enclosure that I'm going to try continue through all the other water habitats in this zoo. First off, I used the two types of reed in the game, which I think everyone does, to be honest. I use them in a certain way, but it's really not that complicated and it's kind of difficult to explain. But obviously you just ground some of the bigger corners with some reeds and it looks fine. As well as that, I'm trying to stick to what I did in the Ruby Basin of Season 1 of COVEA, which is only putting cordyline plants around the water. Whether this is realistic or not, I genuinely have no idea, but it kind of adds a really subtle story to the plants throughout your zoo and really creates an environment that feels more realistic. For example, most palm trees you're going to put near water. I think a lot of people just naturally do that, and I'm doing the same with cordyline plants. I think it just makes a better environment. You would never really notice it, but subconsciously I think it kind of makes everything look a little bit better and make more sense, kind of sticking to the rules. And with the aquatic pack, there's also now 3 types of lily pads in the game. There's the first one, which the groups of them are pretty small, but they're also really big lily pads. I actually put some cordyline plants on some of the bigger lily pads from those sets. And then there's 2 other kinds of lily pads which are similar in size, but they are slightly different. One slightly bigger than the other. So I put the really big one in the center of each kind of cluster of lily pads. Then I put the medium one kind of surrounding that, and surrounding those I put the smaller one, which creates a really cool kind of fade effect out of the lily pads, which again, I don't know if that makes sense, but it looks kind of cool, and I think it creates a better effect than just spamming lily pads anywhere without any real thought. But honestly, there isn't that much for us to talk about for the rest of this time lapse. You will, as always, at the end have some cinematics to get a good look at the habitat. The cinematics at the moment are kind of meh because the rest of the zoo is completely empty. So yeah, the exhibit itself looks good, but then you see everything in the background and it looks really boring. But the cinematics, I guess, will just get better as they go along. But yeah, that is about all we have to talk about. I'm gonna leave you with the rest of the time lapse. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. Leave a comment if you want an animal named after you. Do all that jazz. It really helps me out and I really do appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day and I will see you next week for episode 3. Bye guys!